Right, so we did the, part one was the sort of theoretical stuff behind groundwater flow and storage and all those whatever, what properties they have. Now I'm going to take you through well, not a project, it's a whole series of projects, but basically all of the steps that you would undertake from being given a commission by a client to undertake a project, large scale project, not small scale, all the way through to the very completion of the thing, handing it off and getting the final payment. And it's a large process, it's a big process. It involves a whole range of steps, they're very important steps, and you can't miss any of them out. And on the way, of course, every time as we approach a new sort of topic, a new sort of stage in the project, we'll go over the fundamentals behind it as well as more theories and well equations and all sorts of bits and pieces along. So there'll be a whole lot of all brand new stuff for pretty much every one of you. Okay, so groundwater investigation. The investigation bit is trying to find the stuff, okay, and proving it's there. The development is putting in the wells and testing them and doing the modelling to confirm you've got, hopefully, a long-term resource, because you don't want the thing to run out in a hurry. There's a whole lot of things that you do. Desktop studies and field reconnaissance to start with, reporting and tendering and contracts. And yes, today's lecture will be a little bit drier because we are going to go over tenders and contracts, because it's one thing that you guys, as professionals, hopefully, will encounter. It's one thing that we here at the university never teach you anything about. And it's a real rude shock when you have to get into these things and delve into them and work out what they are. So at least I can give you some little idea of what it's like to deal with these things. Then getting out in the field and actually doing stuff, okay, making holes, getting water out, using your data to design wells, construct the wells, and finally testing them to make sure they work, getting the data out. And it's funny.
Oh, it'll be dry like an aquifer, mate.
What?
Dry like an aquifer.
Wow. You woke up early this morning, didn't you? And finally at the end, I don't know if I'll get that far because we tend to run out of time with only having 6 lectures to tell you all the stuff, that you will, well hopefully you will do some, or you would do some modelling, because you want to defer this as a long-term resource. You need to at least prove it for about 20 odd years to make everyone happy. Okay, so why groundwater in the first place? There's heaps of water on the surface, there's rivers, we can block them up, we can put dams in and whatever. So why would we want groundwater? What's the purpose anyway? Go on, say something.
Just as an alternate source?
Yeah, definitely alternate source, yeah, that's right. And it's a good alternate source. If you can get it, it's really good. Often places, well, they need water, okay? You put a new place in, you need water. So until you build a new subdivision somewhere, you don't have really access to water, you put a new factory up, you don't have really access to water, then you need to find water, okay? So expanding into undeveloped areas is a really good reason. So new subdivisions, new farms, farming practices as well, okay? They're all very water intensive. New agricultural developments, orchards, all these kinds of things. Sometimes, in fact, with orchards, for instance, they're really water intensive, and can be in the winter when you're spraying for frost protection. Down at Athenry, just sort of south of Waihi, Athenry Gorge. There's a farmer there, and it's a little township, and they've got a small reservoir up on a hill. Well, they did have, they use groundwater now. And there were going to be frosts, and so he sprayed all his crops all night to protect them from freezing and drain the water supply. So you've got to take these kinds of things into account. So obviously they need a new source of water with it, and that's they got us to do groundwater developments for them, and it worked out very well. New industries in an area, sometimes, and a lot of the time, you don't have a readily available surface source, or the surface source is tapped out. There are laws, very strict laws, which say how much you can take out of a river or a lake or whatever. Before it goes below a certain level, you can't take any more out of it. It doesn't matter how desperate the needs are. Sorry, I just walked the sun around over here. You've got to find water, okay? You need it. Some places need more water, they're existing places, okay? And we did a lot of work for Western Bay Clean District Council to supply the area sort of from Waihi, or sort of, not Waihi, just Athenry all the way down to Te Puke, because they're growing populations, okay? Lots of people moving there, and certainly over the holiday periods, they are desperately short of water, or actually almost run out, and they have to bring it in. It's also security, future-proofing your supply as well. Often people, some far-looking councils will actually look ahead and say, okay, in year 2030, we're going to need more water. Let's start developing it now. It's cheaper. Let's see if we can actually do it. Otherwise, we'll have to look for something else to do. It also costs lots of money to put pipes in. Pipelines are very expensive, so you don't want to pipe this stuff a long way if you can help it. So having a source next to your demand is a really, really useful thing. Sometimes the existing sources are unreliable. We dam down stuff on the hills out of Te Puke, and it's got a pipeline that travels down through this very unstable hillside to the water treatment plant, and they're constantly having to repair it. It's landslides, knock it out, and it breaks and things, and so they were looking for a more secure supply. The dam itself is also getting very old, and so they decided to look for groundwater. The existing source is stretched, okay, as in the case with the guy that drained the thing, and also over holiday seasons or drought seasons. Okay, so when the lakes and rivers lower, they get to a certain level, you can't take any more. Okay, your resource is very stretched. You have to start rationing or bringing water in. Same with this one, fully allocated for exactly the same reason. Okay, so there's lots and lots of uses for this stuff. Okay, things that people don't even normally worry about. But anything that's manufactured uses water. Anything that's farmed or grown or processed uses water, and they use lots of it. Even quarries, dust abatement, okay, keeping dust levels down. They're spraying. Okay, there's just water going all over the place. Water everywhere, unfortunately, not enough of it around. Upgrade existing infrastructure, as in the case of that dam and pipe system. Okay, there's another reason to go for groundwater. Sometimes you actually replace your existing source. Sometimes you'll just be adding to it. Okay, but here, current infrastructure, old, failing, and expensive to maintain. Dams are expensive. They're expensive to build, and they're expensive to maintain. They're not very environmentally friendly either. Cost. Okay, the cost of groundwater is significantly less. Initially, it's quite expensive because you've got to, you've got to find it, and you drill wells, and you put in pumps and things. But once it's up and running, once it's a viable resource, it's actually very cheap to maintain. It lasts a long time, and it's way cheaper than building a dam. Okay, significantly cheaper, orders of magnitude of cost cheaper than building a dam. And also the maintenance long term is pretty much low. You've got to keep your pumps going. Okay, check your pipes aren't rusting. Otherwise, it's all pretty good. It's safe and secure. It's going to last you a long time. I mean, these things are, when you build them, you guarantee them for at least 20 years, defect free and all sorts of things like that. So it's a good, cheap way to get water. It's also cheaper to treat because the water itself is generally better quality. Okay, depending on how deep it comes from, but if it's come from deep down confined aquifers, it's generally really good quality, so you don't have to do much to it to treat it. Okay, confined aquifers cut off from the surface, not as susceptible to contamination, so anything getting down into groundwater won't make it to a confined aquifer, so you can get a confined source, really, really good stuff. And also the water's clean, most of the pathogens have been filtered out as it's travelled through the aquifer as well. Okay, so you're taking away a lot of the cost of water treatment if you can get this stuff out of the ground. It's a nice constant temperature, okay, and generally groundwater supplies are reliable. They're not climate dependent. Okay, so again, if you've got confined systems, they're pretty good. Okay, you're not going to be too worried about drought conditions as long as you're not damaging it from pulling out too much water. As long as you know it's being recharged, okay, periodically, then it's a much more reliable source often than groundwater. It's also more environmentally friendly than developing surface supplies. All you do is put a hole in the ground. Your well is constructed properly, and all the non-aquifer intervals are sealed off, kept separate from the aquifer. You're only taking water from the aquifer, there's no leakage between. Then it's a safe and environmentally friendly supply, and you're only using a very small footprint. Okay, well's only that big. That's it. Maybe a shed with a pump, with a generator and things. That's all you're really looking at, and then some pipes to take it to source. So way better than these things. You're not flooding huge areas of land, creating all that instability, other issues that go along with it. Okay, and destroying rivers as well. Okay, so lots of reasons for using the stuff. Okay, groundwater is really good. Of course, there's a whole lot of issues with it as well, which is what we'll talk about as we go. And those are the things you try and quantify during these investigations for your client. Okay, so primary steps in the investigations. So this is prior to the development. This is just working out where there's water there. Okay, how much is possibly there, how deep your aquifer is, what it's made of, all those things prior to actually starting to drill proper groundwater wells in the ground, putting in pumps and taking water out long term. So first you need sites, okay, cruise around the country, someone there cruise around the coastline, I'll talk about those in a minute. First you need to locate your sites, and that's generally up to the client. They'll have specific needs, okay, or maybe come down to the fact they own specific plots of land, okay, and so where you're going to start your investigations may be dictated by them. Sometimes you can change their mind, sometimes you can say that that's not acceptable, but generally that may be actually sorted out for you. But either way, locating the sites is the first step. So first you desktop study, right? Getting all the information you can from libraries and whatever, putting all that together. Then you wander around, you choose some likely sites, you actually go out in the field, because of course a paper map copy of something is very, very different from actually going out and looking at it in the field itself, and there'll be a lot of issues that you need to be looking out for when you're out there, because you've got to construct these things as well as build the infrastructure for them, and sometimes field sites don't lend themselves very well to big drill rigs. You may do some geophysics. Okay, it's not something that we're engaged in a lot. It's not necessary, necessary, but you can use, if you want to get a better idea of what's there before you actually start physically putting holes in the ground, you can actually do some shallow or some geophysics, to try and work out, give you more of an idea of what's below there. Okay, dealing with geology is really hard. Right? You've got geologic maps. The scale is usually pretty crap. They're large scale things covering enormous areas. There's no small details, small level stuff, unless someone's done a thesis on it. Outcrop may be bad, so you don't really know what's under your feet anyway to any certainty. Okay, so any information you can have is really, really useful, because it makes you, it leads to a lot less embarrassment in the long run. Because like I say, dealing with geology is really hard. There's way engineers can't handle it. Okay, obtaining samples of aquifer material from potential aquifers is really important. Okay, what is the stuff you're dealing with? What is the aquifer? Is it a sandstone aquifer? Is it a fractured rhyolite or ignimbrite aquifer? Okay, is it confined? Is it unconfined? All those things. Okay, so you need samples and stuff as well. You'll get that from drilling holes. Okay, when you're doing your pilot bores, you'll either do core samples or drill chips. Either way, you'll get some sort of physical material that you can try and look at and get an idea of what your aquifer is made of and how it may behave. Obtaining water levels. Okay, these metric surfaces, okay, hydraulic head or whatever, from potential aquifers. Whether you're dealing with a confined aquifer or an unconfined aquifer, you get useful information from that. So again, you get that as you're drilling your well. And then water samples. You want to know if the water you're getting out of the ground is good. It's not all good. Some water is really bad. Some water is full of arsenic. Arsenic is not a good thing. Okay, some water is very salty. Okay, some water is full of iron, dissolved iron. Again, all the things that can be issues when you need to take this stuff out and treat it, or in some cases you can't use it at all. Okay, and you get those while you're drilling as well, like when you're developing the bore, cleaning it out. All this will be explained as we go. And we need to obtain some preliminary aquifer characteristics to tell us whether the damn thing's going to be producing water for us anyway. What are the K values like? Okay, does water flow reasonably fast through this thing? Okay, is it transmissive? Has it got good storage capabilities? Okay, and as you're drilling your pilot bores, your initial bores, you'll do displacement tests or lugen tests to give you preliminary estimates of those characteristics. Okay, so these are the whole lot of things you do. This is the initial investigation. This is all the stuff you do before you actually say, yep, okay, we're going to put some wells down here, we're going to take water out of the ground, and we're going to test them and turn it into a groundwater supply. So it's quite a palaver. Okay, so your first stop is your desktop study. Okay, it may seem old-fashioned, old hat, but it's really, really important. And you can't just get it all from Google. Okay, in fact, most of it you can't get from Google. Unfortunately, it would be good if you could. So the objective is to collate as much information as you can on groundwater from the area that you're looking at using as a resource, as exploiting. Okay, the more the better, because you can make your decisions much more informed. You may even be able to save significant amounts of money. Sometimes other people will have done work in the area before you. You can use that stuff that's available. Identification of possible water-bearing strata, i.e. aquifers, is what you're trying to do here. Okay, initial. Now, of course, they're underground. Okay, as I said, the geology itself is really hard to deal with. But you're making an attempt. Okay, you can get your maps, you can do some cross sections, you can work out what should be below your feet using the knowledge of geology that you have, and other info as well. If possible, potential sites should be client-owned or in a place where you could purchase it. You don't want to go drilling right in the middle of a farmer's paddock, in the middle of his block, because then if you even want to develop a resource and you want to use that particular area to put your boreholes in, you've got to buy a little tiny square of land in the middle of the farmer's land, and he charges you an absolute fortune for it. And they do that. Farmers are devious buggers. And so some of them are really, that's why they got lots of money. And some of them are really hard to deal with. So the client hopefully should own properties. And if you're dealing with the council, they generally do own a lot of property, like all the roadsides and all these other bits and pieces. So it works out all right. Geologic maps and booklets, first stop, of course. Okay, go to the library or whatever it is, or you have to buy them for a company. Companies are also really stingy. They want you to do a job for them, and they don't want you to spend any money. Even try to get them to buy maps is hard work sometimes. You do need this stuff, so geologic maps and the booklets that go with them. Remember, they give you the local, or the aerial stratigraphy, okay, and what the rock types are, so you get a good idea of exactly what you should be dealing with. I'll show you where you can maybe go and see surface outcrops of things. You can go and play with the stuff. You might be able to get some stuff and do some testing on it, okay? But either way, determining the geologic environment. Structures are also important, not just the strata, okay? Whatever is below your feet is going to determine whether you get good aquifers and how they work. Do some simple cross sections. Okay, some of you are getting better at doing those now, I would hope. And yeah, that's pretty easy to do from a geologic map. Okay, it'll give you an idea of depths that you may be encountering water-bearing material at. And that's really important because the deeper you have to go, the more it costs, both in investigations and in developing the resource. So if you can get some possible ideas, even if they're just ballpark figures, it's all really useful stuff. Topo maps, of course, because when you're scoping out a site, you want to know whether you don't want to, like, for instance, try and build a well on a hillside. Okay, that'll be dumb. Okay, you want to be as low down as possible rather than sitting up on hilltops, etc., etc. So topo maps are important, okay, and useful for working out access, because again, when you're constructing these things or you're investigating them, there's a lot of heavy equipment involved in the process, and it has to be able to get in and out, etc. If not, then it can be very, very expensive. You don't have to use helicopters if you don't need to. So topography of potential sites is really important, whether what the regime overall, the water regime overall around the area is like. Are there lots of streams and lakes and springs and things? Is there groundwater discharge or groundwater recharge? It's all important as part of the overall groundwater system. Proximity to the coast, you don't want to be too close to salt water. Okay? You don't want to be close to it at all for the obvious reason. If you start pumping, taking fresh water out, the salt water approaches where the fresh water was and you never get rid of it. Okay? The salt water comes rushing in and you get that into your system, it's not very good at all. Okay? People don't generally like drinking salt water. Infrastructure and access. Okay? Are there access roads, tracks? Okay? Is there any existing infrastructure around? Power lines, okay? Pipelines, all sorts of things. You don't want to drill through any of these things, okay? And you don't want to have to try and put a drill rig up under a power line, etc., etc. Okay, so again, useful information. Any specialist maps, you probably won't encounter these, they're few and far between. And generally, if there are specialist maps of an area, someone will have done them for just what you're doing, so they've probably already done it. Okay, so they're not that big a deal. But sometimes you can find some specialist maps that may give you an idea of what's going on. You can construct structure contour maps yourself as well if you wanted to see if you knew what structures were there, okay, what they were doing underground over a large area, how they affect your aquifer system. Aerial photos, these things at the moment in 372 if you're doing that. Really important as well, okay, you're getting a really good bird's eye view. Same with Google Earth, another one. Okay, well, the aerial photos will tend to be, because they're on such a smaller scale, much clearer, much more detailed, and you get a 3D view of them as well. You can use the stereoscopes to get a good idea of the three-dimensional aspect of topography. Okay, you may also be able to spot faults, fracture systems, old river channels, things that aren't obvious from other sources, things that could give you an idea of whether you've got barriers to water flow, or you've got other things there that may in fact enhance the water flow, and your lineaments, okay, all those useful things. Any published groundwater reports? There are a lot of these around, okay, because people have done these for other reasons. Councils commission people just to do a report on the groundwater of an area, okay, and they will be there accessible to the public. Sometimes companies keep data to themselves, but if they've been working for a council or for a public body, they have to divulge all that data, and you can get it out of them if they don't want to give it to you. Because the consultant has to provide the client with a full set of documentation, and the client generally is quite happy to give it to you because they're paying for you to do the job for them. Libraries, university and public, so books, recent and old published material, all the normal things. Theses as well, okay, search engines, databases. They actually put in quite a lot of time and effort into this search. Okay, it seems to be a lot of stuff ad nauseum. Okay, it's no different than doing a report or an essay or whatever for one of us, except for these, for a client to do it way better, I hope. You'd be looking for an A+, not a C-. Yeah, PhD, MSc, BSc theses, they generally contain useful information. Okay, a lot of useful information. People tend to overlook these things because they go, oh, it's some really hard scientific documentation. Rubbish. Delve into it. It's easy stuff, especially for you guys. Any existing well information in an area. Surprisingly enough, if someone's looking to develop an area for groundwater, Lots of other people around the place have probably got groundwater bores in as well, especially if you're in a rural area, because farmers use them all the time. There won't be a lot of information on them. They've probably got their mate to have drilled a hole and then they just whacked the pipe into it, stuck a pump in it, and they've been using it for years. But they don't generally extract a lot of water. You're going to be extracting a lot more water. What will happen, if you go and put a nice big well extracting, say, I don't know, 4,000 cubic metres a day from this aquifer system, all the other people with their little shallow bores around the area are going to get very unhappy when yours starts lowering the piezometric surface of the groundwater table below the level of their bore, and theirs doesn't get water anymore. So existing well information is really important. You have to notify other people in the area when you're doing these projects, when you're starting to develop these resources. But also you can use these wells as well if there's data on them. Okay? If someone's done a pump test, even if it's a short-term pump test when they constructed it, you can use that. It's giving you information directly about the aquifer. You get transmissivity, storativity, hydraulic conductivity from that data. Okay, and so you can get, again, some really good preliminary results. You'll still go and get your own, of course, and do your own testing, but you'll have a really good idea as to whether it's even worthwhile trying if you can get information from existing wells. It's supposed to be lodged with councils. Most of them are, but the information's pretty scant. But they're just drillers' logs. They'll say, this deep we found gravelly stuff, and down here we found rock, and great. But they can be all right. Depends who did them. But you'll certainly get depths to different lithologies, depth to hard rock, whether there are any confining layers or whatever. They may have done a quick test, and they usually have to do a water quality analysis as well, which should be lodged too, so you get an idea of the quality of water from the depth that they're tapping into. TerraView, that's a database of land ownership, and so you can check out parcels of land and see who they're owned by. The other useful thing is that it shows things that aren't on normal maps and plans. It shows things like paper roads. Often there'll be a farm, and you want to think that'd be a good place to go and drill a hole. You think, oh no, we'll have to access across the farm and get permission to use the driveway and things. Often not. Often there'll be paper roads, okay, that the farmers exploited, and they put their driveways on and all sorts of things, and you can use it if you want. Okay, it's council property, and we've done that several times. Much to the disgust of the farmers, but that's their issue. They shouldn't have used the paper road for their property. So that level of investigation is really useful. Okay, you can save lots of time and money with that information, so land and property information, who owns it, and also Google Earth and the internet. Okay, so, Jesse would be diving straight into that, wouldn't he? Structure contest. I'll just Google that. How'd that go for you? It's all good. I laugh at you guys because the first thing you guys seem to do is hit this. And there's a lot of other information out there. Although I must say nowadays, it's a good place to start. It's a lot better than it was about 10 years ago when good old Wikipedia was just unbelievably it was hilarious. You guys are really lucky to have that as a resource nowadays, I tell you. Okay, field reconnaissance. Okay, so you've done your desktop study, you've decided where you might want to go, and you're going to go out and have a look. Okay, so you don't wear your desk work clothes because you'll be going to some pretty crazy places. But you're going to try to verify the initial details of your study, your desktop study, gather more info as well, and have a look at the potential sites. Some of them you'll cross off your list straight away, talk to landowners, you do all those sorts of things, check the sites, whether there's enough space to construct a well. When you're making these things, like I say, the finished product's actually quite small, but you do need a bit of space because trucks and drill rigs and all sorts, and water pits and mud pits and things take up a bit of space when you're constructing all these things. Also, there's a nice flat area. Okay, remember I said you can't go drilling these things on the side of a hill, it's totally impractical. What hazards around? Things that don't show up on maps, okay? Buried surfaces, power lines, all those things you need to avoid when you are trying to construct and run one of these things later on. Distance from existing infrastructure. So I said before, piping water or piping anything, costs a lot of money per kilometre. It's a huge expense. Okay, so you want to be constructing your wells as close as possible to existing infrastructure, water treatment plants, and existing pipelines. Talk to people in the area. Sometimes they have a lot of useful information to say. Of course, if you're going to be drilling on or close to their land, you're going to be around there for quite a while making noise. You need to let them know about that kind of thing as well. Okay, but if you need to go through their land for access, but you've got to get their permission. They'll generally negotiate that with the client, but at least you can make them aware that it might be coming up. Construction, all sorts of noise and things going on. So it is a noisy process, drilling. Oh, these things too, they're great. try and drill in the paddock during where there's stock around there, just a damn nuisance. If you need permanent access later on, you might have to buy a parcel of land off the person. Okay, so you need to sort of get that process set in motion as well. That might be a deal clincher. The client may say, no, we won't do that, we have to go somewhere else. Any water features that aren't shown on the maps, okay, the groundwater discharge or recharge features, okay, to tell you what's going on. Talk to the locals, okay, talk to farmers. And that's hard because they don't stop talking, but they do feed you. And they do often have useful information. They are picking know-it-alls though. Some of them, most of what they know is rubbish. They're all experts on geology for some reason. All farmers are experts on geology. It's amazing. But anyway, if there are any existing wells, yak to the people that own them. You know, you might want to use them later when you start doing your long-term pump testing and even extraction for public use, you know, for potable water. You may want to use their wells as monitoring points. They may be very useful information, you know, especially if they're varying distances away from your particular location. You'll get really, really useful information from them. Okay, and as I said before, possible effects of any new wells on existing shallow wells. Okay, so there's a few sites that we've involved in over the years. So this is a little road, Bayless Road down at Hockey, and there's a water treatment plant. It's really handy, so it's a good place to put a water bore in. Client-owned land, but on the verge of a road, okay, so you've got to be very careful there. And notice the overhead power lines there. Okay, it's a definite hazard. All these things, I'll talk about tendering, and all these things have to be explained to the tenderer. But these are the things you look for when you're going to look for a particular place to draw a hole to get water out of. Okay, in this case, it's client-owned, easy access, close to infrastructure. Geology not obvious from the topography. You know, it was a bit of a tricky one. It's all flat land. So a lot of what we were drilling through, we were just, well, in fact, everything we encountered was pretty much new, and we were just, well, sort of lucky enough, I guess, that we had some useful water. Hazards here, power lines, road, and various services. And so there you've got a whole lot of things all together. Okay, some good, some bad. This one here, this is in Kiriki. We had a big Kiriki. That avocado orchard was a really weird dog like eating avocados. This wasn't client-owned, so if they were going to drill here, they would have to buy a parcel of land or regional lease it off the owner. And so if you're going to be doing this on someone's property, then you've got to make sure that they're amenable to it, otherwise you just get up and go somewhere else. Close to infrastructure, that was good. The geology was quite obvious. Just to the west, you got the high ice, that's the Andesite mountain range down the area, and that's what we're trying to target for water, because it's really good water supply area. No hazards, of course you're on someone's property, there's out in the middle of a paddock, there's nothing buried there, so overhead power lines. So all pretty good apart from it's not client owned. But and another one here, this time it was owned. This was the paper road one, where we said, okay, we're going to be drilling here, we can, because the council owns the property and there's nothing you can do about it. We're not quite, you don't say that to them. Okay, you negotiate and generally they're okay with it, it's not like a big deal, but if they did decide to put a bite there, they wouldn't really have a leg to stand on, because if stuff had been marked down as paper roads, i.e. roads that are on paper but not built, then I'm afraid they're council property. Easy to get in and out, close to infrastructure. In the back here, up there, it goes right up the back, way up into the sky behind you. There's a nice big rhyolite dome, okay, a really good possible aquifer, and no hazards apart from cattle. So different scenarios, but this is why you go in the field to have a look in the first place, okay? You want to scope all these things out. You have to be prepared and aware of what's going on. You're also out there sort of making friends, hopefully, with the locals and with the farmers and the communities, because you don't want to be a big enemy of them. In fact, when you're working for a council, all those locals are the ones paying for all this with their rates, and so everyone keeps on side. I'm surprised at the politics that goes on with the council and these things as well. It's just amazing. Okay, and you may do some geophysics, some shallow geophysics to determine what goes on. Okay, this is not something we engaged in a lot of, an extra expense and probably wasn't necessary, but a lot of companies do. Some things we've done much more overseas than in New Zealand. So you're trying to identify all the way from a place potential drill sites by collecting subsurface data, okay, working out what is under your feet, you know, where bedrock is, what kind of rock types you may be encountering, etc., etc. Okay? Just that is the normal old, I'm not going to dwell on this much. You know, seismics to determine extent or thickness of various layers, depths to confining layers or whatever. Gravity measurements, detecting variations in density of subsurface, maybe I'll determine old buried valleys, you know, things like that, okay, are quite identifiable in gravity surveys, and they can be really good aquifers, okay, very river valleys, because of course river channel lag is quite porous, okay, it makes really good aquifers confined or unconfined. And electromagnetic surveys as well.